The alien market was loud and cruel, filled with laughter, shouting, and sharp smells in the air. Aliens of many kinds walked past food stalls and cages. Ignoring the weak and the hungry, no one looked down at the small girl sitting near the garbage pile. She was wrapped in thin cloth, torn and dirty, barely covering her pale blue skin. Her legs were shaking, her lips dry and cracked. She had not eaten in days, maybe more. She watched food traders throwing away spoiled bread and meat scraps. Her stomach growled, louder than before, but no one cared. She stood slowly, wobbling, and stepped toward a tall alien merchant. He was selling roasted meat, the smell making. Her dizzy with hunger, the merchant saw her and laughed. "What do you want, trash girl?" She looked up with wide eyes and whispered, "Please, I just need a little food," he sneered. "Got something to trade?" She hesitated, then lowered her head and said, "All I have are my clothes." The crowd near the stall heard her, and silence fell for a second. Then came the cruel laughter. Sharp like knives, the merchant grinned. "Go on then, if that's your offer." He tossed a moldy bread chunk at her feet. She looked at the bread, then at her clothes, slowly, with shaking fingers. She untied her cloth from her shoulder. Gasps came from the crowd, and some even cheered. "She's really doing it," someone said, laughing, pathetic. Another voice sneered, but one figure in the crowd didn't move. He stood still, hands clenched, eyes locked on the girl. He was human, tall and rough-looking, with a soldier's jacket and a scar on his cheek. He had seen war, pain, and loss, but this made his blood boil. In a different way, he watched as the girl dropped her cloth and reached for the bread. Then he stepped forward, his boots loud on the broken street. Before her hand could touch the food, a heavy black cloak landed on her back. The girl froze, confused, and turned to see the human standing beside her. He looked at the merchant and said in a low voice, "She's not yours." The merchant laughed. "You want her? Then pay up." "Human?" The human's eyes narrowed. "She's not for sale." The crowd grew quiet again, tension rising like heat. "No one told you to get involved." "Offworlder," someone said. The human ignored them and knelt beside the girl. He gently wrapped the cloak tighter around her, hiding her bare skin. "Come with me," he said softly. She looked scared, confused, and unsure, but her legs moved on their own, following the warmth of his voice. The merchant growled, "You'll regret this." The human turned his head slightly and said, "Maybe?" Then he walked away with the girl under his arm. The crowd parted, no one brave enough to stop him. Whispers followed them, some mocking, some curious, a few even respectful. The girl held the cloak close as they moved through the dark streets. Her voice came small, like wind through leaves. "Why did you do that?" The human didn't answer right away. He glanced at her, then simply said, "Because I was too late once before." She didn't understand, but she didn't ask again. Her body was tired, her feet cold, her mind spinning, but something in her heart felt different, like hope. The crowd, the hunger, the shame, it was still there. But beside this strange human, it didn't feel as heavy in the shadows of the alien world. One girl had offered her last piece of dignity for food, but one human had stepped in not to buy her, not to use her, but to save her, and the story was only just beginning. The human's cloak was heavy on her shoulders, but it felt warm. Warmer than anything she had touched in many cycles. She didn't even know where he was taking her, yet she followed, step by step. Through broken roads and narrow alleys, the lights of the market faded behind them, and the night grew colder. But the human didn't slow down. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning every shadow. One hand stayed close to his side, where a weapon was hidden under his coat. The girl, still trembling, held the edge of the cloak tighter. Her voice came out weak. "You're not from here." "No," the human replied without looking back. She tried to walk faster, but her legs were weak. He noticed her struggling and suddenly stopped. Without a word, he crouched and gently lifted her into his arms. She gasped, her heart racing. "W, what are you doing?" "You're freezing and limping," he said. "I can carry you." She didn't argue. She was too tired, too confused, too cold to resist. The human's small shelter sat at the edge of the colony. Hidden between two rusted storage units, the door opened with a quiet hiss, revealing a single room with basic supplies: a cot, heater, some food packs. He carried her inside and set her gently on the cot. She stared at the walls, at the tiny lights, at the strange but clean space. "Eat," he said, handing her a warm food packet. Her hands shook as she opened it. The scent hitting her like a memory, she devoured it without speaking, crumbs falling from her lips. The human sat nearby, silent, watching her with unreadable eyes. After a few minutes, she wiped her mouth and looked at him. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you help me?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "I told you before," he said. "Because I was too late once." She tilted her head. Confused, he sighed and leaned back in the chair. "There was another girl, a long time ago," he said. His voice low. "She needed help, and I hesitated when I came back." She was gone. The girl looked down, her voice a whisper. "Was she like me?" He nodded. Slowly, she pulled the cloak around her tighter. "Like armor, does that mean?" "I remind you of her." "No," he replied. "You remind me of what?" "I should have done." Silence filled the room again. Outside, the wind howled against metal walls. Inside, warmth from the small heater filled the space, but not all the silence. The girl lay down, her body finally relaxing after so long, but her mind remained alert, afraid. She watched him carefully, afraid he would ask for something now, that he'd say the food, the shelter. The cloak, it all had a price. He noticed her staring and spoke gently. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." She didn't answer, but her eyes blinked slower. For the first time in cycles, her body allowed itself to sleep. That night, the human stayed awake. He cleaned his gear, checked his weapon, and sat by the door. He knew the colony would talk. He had embarrassed the traitors, challenged their power, and they wouldn't forget it. Somewhere deep in the night, she whimpered in her sleep. He turned to her and saw tears running down her cheeks. She whispered something in her native tongue, lost in a dream. He didn't understand, but he walked over quietly and pulled the cloak back over her. She calmed down, breath slowing again. Morning came with a dull light sneaking through the old metal cracks. The girl opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the silence. She sat up and found a new set of clothes folded beside her. Simple but clean, nothing fancy, but not rags. She held them close, confused again. Then she saw him pouring something into 2 cups. "Drink," he said, handing her one. "It's not poison. Don't worry," he added, with a small smile. She sniffed it, then took a sip, warm and slightly sweet. It made her chest feel light. "Do I have to repay you?" she asked after a long silence. "No," he said, without hesitation. "But I don't have anything." "You have a name," he said. She flinched, looking down. "I don't remember it," she whispered, ashamed. He nodded. "Then we'll find one, in that quiet morning, in a forgotten corner of the galaxy." A girl who had nothing but shame met a man who expected nothing in return. And in that fragile silence, something strange began to grow. Not love, not yet, but maybe hope. The girl sat by the heater, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. She watched the steam rise and disappear, like memories she couldn't catch. The cloak still covered her shoulders, like a shield from the world. The human moved around quietly, placing supplies back into drawers and sealing his weapon case. He didn't speak much. But his silence wasn't cold. It was a silence that gave her space, not fear. She took another sip and then looked up at him. "You said?" "I should have a name," she whispered. He turned, his face calm, and nodded. "Yeah," she hesitated, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I don't know what to choose." He sat on the edge of the cot, careful not to come too close. "Well," he said, thinking, "where are you from?" "I don't remember," she replied softly. "They took me when I was little." The human's jaw tightened. Just for a second, he knew what she meant without asking. "Do you remember what they called you?" She shook her head. "Just thing or girl or slave?" The human frowned, then pointed at her cup. "Then let's try something new," he said. "How about Mira?" She repeated the word softly. "Mira. It means light in one of the old Earth languages." He said. "You walked through darkness," he added, "but you're still here." The girl Myra blinked slowly, the name feeling strange in her mouth, but it was hers now, and she smiled for the first time. It was small, unsure, but it was real. The human smiled back, just a little, before standing up again. He moved to a console near the wall and tapped something into the screen. A soft beep echoed in the small room. "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Checking for colony alerts," he said. "They'll be looking for you?" Myra's fingers tightened around the cup. "Then I should leave," she said quickly. Panic rising in her chest. "I don't want them to hurt you. You're not going anywhere," he replied firmly. "You didn't ask for any of this, but they'll come for me," she whispered. "Then they'll have to go through me," he said calmly. Myra looked at him like he was mad. "No one stands against them," she said. "Not for someone like me, I do," the human replied, "and I will." His voice wasn't loud, but it had weight. Didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a fact, outside. The sun was hidden behind dark clouds. A soft rain began to fall over the metal roofs of the colony. The human opened a storage bin and pulled out a gray jacket. "This should fit," he said, handing it to her. Mira held the jacket close. Like it was treasure, her new clothes were plain but clean, better than anything she'd worn in years. As she dressed behind a curtain, she looked into a mirror for the first time in a long time. She didn't recognize the face looking back. The girl in the glass had tired eyes, thin cheeks, and small scars on her neck. But she also had something else, a name now, and a place that wasn't cold. When she stepped out, the human nodded in approval. "Looks better on you than it ever did on me," he said. She gave another small smile, still unsure how to show happiness. "What's your name?" she asked suddenly. He paused, then said, "Colt, is that your first name or last name?" He grinned. "Does it matter?" She giggled, just a little, and shook her head. "I guess not." The quiet moment didn't last long. A sudden knock pounded against the metal door, hard and sharp. Mira jumped back, eyes wide with fear. Colt moved instantly, placing himself between her and the door. He picked up his weapon, a plasma sidearm, and stepped slowly toward the entry. "Stay behind me," he said, not looking back. The door buzzed again. Another knock, this time louder. "Colt," came a voice from outside, deep and rough. "This is Captain Vern of Colony Security." Colt didn't answer right away. He motioned Mira to hide in the corner. She obeyed, crouching behind a pile of crates. Heart pounding, Colt pressed a button on the wall, opening a speaker channel. "What do you want?" he asked calmly. "There are reports you interfered with a public transaction," Varn's voice said. Colt narrowed his eyes. "You mean I stopped a girl from being stripped and sold for food?" "That girl was claimed property," Vern snapped. "Return her or face the law. I won't hand her over." Colt replied, voice like steel. "Then we'll be back with force." Vern warned, the speaker cut off, and silence returned. Colt lowered his weapon, but didn't relax. He turned to Myra, whose face was pale. "They're coming back," she whispered. I know, Colt said. She stood up slowly, her knees still shaking. What will we do? He looked her straight in the eyes. We'll survive, he said. Together. The air inside the small shelter was heavy. The threat outside still echoed in Mira's ears. She sat on the floor, knees pulled up, hugging them tightly. Colt checked his gear slowly, hands calm but movements sharp. He was used to this kind of tension. Mira was not. I shouldn't have come here, she whispered, her voice cracking. Colt didn't respond right away. He slid a metal case shut and turned to her. You didn't come here, he said. You were dragged by fate, but now you're in danger, she replied, guilt pressing into her chest like a stone. Colt sat on the cot and leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. I've been in danger since I left Earth, he said with a dry smile. This is nothing new. Myra looked at him, really looked this time. There were scars on his hands, thin ones across his arms. A deep line ran under his jolt, healed, but still ugly. What happened to you? She asked softly. Colt didn't answer for a long moment. Then he leaned back, looking at the ceiling. I was a soldier, he began, his voice low. Part of a peace mission gone wrong. She listened quietly, her breathing slowing to match his words. We were sent to help settle a conflict between two alien clans, but someone lied. Someone wanted war, not peace. My unit walked into an ambush. He closed his eyes for a second, like reliving the memory. Everyone died, he said, except me. They left me alive on purpose, a warning to others. Myra's mouth opened, but she said nothing. What could she say to that? She had known pain, but this was a different kind. Colt wasn't just a soldier, he was a survivor. After that, I left the military, he continued. Started taking contracts protection, transport, scavenging. I never stayed long in one place until now. Why here? She asked. He looked at her, eyes steady. I didn't plan to stay, he admitted. But then I saw what they did to you, and I remembered that day. What day? She asked, voice small. The day I hesitated, he said, there was a girl, a young alien like you. She asked for help, and I was too slow. They dragged her away. I never saw her again. Myra's hands trembled slightly. Colt stood and walked over, crouching beside her. I won't let that happen again, he said. I won't lose another innocent. Her throat tightened, and tears filled her eyes. No one had ever said she was innocent before. She had, always, been useless, trash, or worthless. But Colt's voice made those lies melt away. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the storm had passed, but the air still carried a chill. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed, not loud, not like before. Colt moved quickly to the door. Weapon drawn, Mira held her breath, hiding once again. But this time, the voice outside was different. Colt, came a softer tone. It's Zaira. Colt lowered the gun slightly. He pressed a button and the door hissed open a crack. A female alien stood there tall, with dark green skin and golden eyes. She wore a worn leather jacket and had a rifle slung across her back. You're causing trouble again, she said with a smirk. Colt sighed. I always do. Zaira glanced around, then stepped inside. She looked toward the crates, where Mira peeked out slowly. So that's the girl, Zaira said, her smile fading. Colt nodded. They wanted to strip her in the street. Zaira's jaw clenched. I heard the markets buzzing about it, she added. You made enemies. I made a choice, Colt replied. Zaira looked at Mira, who was still half hidden. Come out, she said gently. I won't hurt you. Mira stepped forward slowly, unsure but curious. You've got a name? Zaira asked. Mira, the girl said, voice barely audible. Zaira nodded. Good name. You're lucky Colt found you, she added. He doesn't usually get involved. I didn't give him a choice, Mira said. Zaire raised an eyebrow, then chuckled. I like her, she said to Colt. She's got some fire under all that fear. Colt didn't smile, but his eyes softened. She needs protection, he said, and a way out. Zia leaned against the wall, arms crossed. There's talk of a transport ship leaving in 2 days. Headed to the outer rim, Colt's face turned serious. Will they check the passenger list? Zaira nodded. Of course, but I know someone who owes me a favor. Mira listened carefully, her heart beating fast, a chance to escape, to live freely, but would she have to leave Colt behind? She looked at him and whispered, Will you come with me? Colt didn't answer right away. He looked at her, then at Zaira, then out the narrow window. We'll see, he said quietly. We'll see. Night returned to the colony like a creeping fog. Neon lights flickered on the corners of broken buildings. The air was quiet, but it didn't feel calm. It felt like the city was holding its breath. Inside Colt's shelter, Mira sat with a small blanket wrapped around her. Zaira had left. Promising to contact the smuggler by morning, Colt sat across the room. Checking a hidden rifle and counting plasma cartridges, he moved with focus. But Mira noticed how often he glanced at the door. They're coming, aren't they? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Colt looked at her and gave a slow nod. They won't stop until they take you back or kill me trying. Mira felt her chest tighten with guilt. I should turn myself in, she said quietly. No. Colt said, voice sharp enough to cut through her fear. I didn't save you so you could hand yourself back over. You're not their property. Mira. She looked down at her hands, still shaking slightly. I don't want you to get hurt. Colt got up and crouched beside her. Listen to me, he said. I've faced worse than these thugs, but they own the guards. She replied, the market, the streets, the air. They don't own me, Colt said, eyes blazing with quiet fire. They don't own what's right. Suddenly, sharp sound pierced the air outside a signal whistle. Colt's face changed in an instant, calm fading into combat. He grabbed his rifle and slid open a small hatch in the wall. Through it, he could see the alley. Dim and empty, but not for long. They're here, he said. He turned back to Mira and pointed to a panel on the floor. Get in, she blinked. What? There's a crawl space. It's small, but it'll keep you hidden. Myra moved without question, pulling up the panel and sliding down into the darkness. Colt shut the hatch above her and turned toward the door. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, not today. A loud knock shook the metal door. Open up, Colt. Came a voice full of arrogance. It was Captain Vern again, but this time he wasn't alone. Colt could hear heavy boots outside, the stomping of many feet. Colt pressed a button near the door. Activating the speaker. You're not welcome here, he said. You have something that belongs to the colony, Vern replied. I have. Someone you tried to break in public? Colt snapped. I won't give her back. Then you die, Vern said flatly. The door hissed, sparks flying as plasma tools began cutting through the lock. Colt backed away, took aim, and waited. The door blasted open with a burst of blue fire. 4 armored guards rushed in, rifles drawn. Colt fired. Hitting the first one square in the chest, the man flew back, armor cracking as he hit the wall. The others spread out, returning fire. Colt moved fast, sliding behind a crate and launching another blast. The shelter was small, and the battle was close. Mira held her breath under the floor, eyes wide in the dark. She could hear the shots, the shouting, and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Another guard went down with a scream, but Colt took a hit in the shoulder. He grunted, dropped behind cover, and hissed through clenched teeth, blood soaked through his jacket. But he still held his weapon firm. Suddenly, More gunfire echoed, but it wasn't Colt's. It came from outside, rapid and sharp. Then a voice yelled. Back away from the shelter. Mira recognized it. Zira. The guards panicked, caught between Colt's fire inside and Zira's ambush. Outside, one tried to run, only to be hit in the leg by Zira's shot. Vern shouted, "Retreat," and the remaining guards scrambled out. Dragging the wounded with them, silence fell again, broken only by the hiss of Colt's wound burning as he applied a med patch. He walked to the hatch and opened it. Mira crawled out, eyes full of tears. "You're hurt," she said. Reaching toward him, "I've had worse," he said with a weak smile. Zira stepped in behind him, rifle still warm. "You always did attract the wrong kind of attention," she said. "Good thing I like a fight." Colt chuckled and leaned against the wall. Zira helped him sit, then turned to Mira. "You okay?" Myra nodded slowly, but her body was still trembling. Zaire knelt and looked her in the eyes. "That's what they do, you know," she said. "They try to make you feel small, but you're not small, Mira. You're just not afraid anymore." Mira looked at Colt, then back at Zaira, for the first time in her life. She believed that might be true. The next morning came too soon. Colt sat on the edge of the cot, his shirt off, shoulder bandaged, the wound burned. But it wasn't the worst he'd felt. Zaira stood near the door, loading her rifle. Her face calm but serious. Myra moved slowly around the room, cleaning up the broken crates and shattered glass. Her hands were careful, her expression focused. She wasn't shaking like before. She was changing. "You sure you want to do this?" Zaire asked Colt. He nodded, adjusting the strap on his arm. "They'll come again," he said, "next time with more men. Maybe even the traitors themselves." Zaire sighed. "Then we hit them before they hit us." Colt looked at Mira. "You still want to leave?" She paused, then nodded. "Yes, but not while hiding," she added, her voice firmer than before. "I don't want to run anymore." Colt stared at her, seeing the fire that had once been hidden under dirt and fear. He smiled slightly. "All right," he said. "Then we fight, and we make it loud." By midday, word had spread. The human had stood against the traitors and lived. Crowds gathered in the market square, whispers buzzing through the air like sparks. Some came out of curiosity, others for justice, and many to see if the human would survive round 2. Colt walked down the center street, coat open, rifle on his back. Zaira was at his side, and Mira walked between them, wearing clean clothes and holding her chin high. They stepped into the square, and the crowd parted. From the other side came Captain Vern, flanked by a dozen guards in black armor. Behind them stood the head merchant, thick, sneering creature named Crawl. Crawl's eyes burned with pride and greed. "There she is," Crawl spat, pointing at Mira. "She belongs to me." Colt stepped forward, voice calm but loud. "She belongs to no one." The crowd grew silent, all eyes on them. Crawl's lips curled. "You're not a judge, human. And you're not a king," Colt replied. "You stripped her in public, mocked her suffering. You don't deserve power." Vern stepped up. "You broke the law," he said. "You attacked colony security." "I defended a child," Colt answered. "In every law that matters, that's called justice." Crawl waved a hand. "Enough. Hand her over." "No," Colt said, reaching behind his back slowly. He drew his rifle, pointing it at the ground, but ready. Zaire raised hers too. The crowd tensed, some backing away, others standing frozen. Crawl growled, "Kill them all." Vern hesitated, just for a second, and in that second, everything exploded. Blaster fire lit up the square. People screamed and ran. Colt ducked behind a stone pillar, firing shot after shot with precision. Zaira rolled across crates, taking down 2 guards before they could blink. Mira stood frozen behind them, heart racing. She watched the battle with wide eyes, but didn't run one guard. Rushed toward her, weapon raised. Colt saw him too late, but Myra moved, ducking down and grabbing a broken rod from the ground. She swung it with all her strength, hitting the guard's leg. He fell hard, weapon clattering away. Colt reached her side and pulled her back. "Good," he said with a grin. "Very good, Zaira." Tossed a smoke grenade, covering their movements within seconds. The battlefield turned into chaos. Colt pushed through the smoke, dragging Mira behind him. Shots flew over their heads, but they kept moving. Crawl shouted, "Stop them," but even his own men started backing away. The human wasn't just dangerous, he was fearless. The smoke cleared and Colt stood in the center again, bleeding from his arm. Zaira stood beside him, bruised but breathing, and Mira stepped forward too. Eyes burning, "This is our colony too," she shouted. "You don't get to treat us like garbage," Crawl growled, stepping forward with his blade drawn. "I'll deal with you myself," he lunged, but Colt moved faster, with one clean swing of the butt of his rifle. He knocked Crawl to the ground. Vern watched silently, then looked at his men. They didn't move, not one of them. Colt stepped over Crawl's body and said loudly, "Anyone else want to own a child today?" Silence. Mira looked at the crowd, and for the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. Colt reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "It's almost over," he said. "Not yet," she whispered, "but soon." The crowd was still frozen in the market square. Crawl lay on the ground, groaning, blood dripping from his mouth. Captain Vern lowered his weapon, his face pale and unreadable. No one else moved. No one dared. Colt stood tall, Mira beside him. Zaira moved to cover them both, eyes scanning the crowd. The silence was louder than any gunfire, and then, slowly, the whispers began. She stood up to them, someone murmured. The human protected her. Another voice added. They fought back. Mira looked at the faces around her. Some were shocked, some ashamed. A few even nodded in respect. For once, she wasn't invisible. For once, she wasn't trash. Vern stepped forward, hands raised slowly. "She's not registered," he said carefully, "but perhaps we can forget this happened." Colt narrowed his eyes. "You only want peace now because you're outgunned," he said. Vern didn't deny it. Colt looked around and raised his voice. "This girl was humiliated in front of all of you, stripped, laughed at, treated like nothing, but she's not nothing." He continued, "She's alive, brave, and she fought back." Mira's heart thudded in her chest as all eyes turned to her. She wanted to run, to hide, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped forward and took off the human's cloak. Not to undress this time, but to fold it neatly and hand it back to him. She stood straight in her clean clothes, head high. "I don't need to hide anymore," she said. "I don't need to sell my skin to eat. I have a name," she added. Louder now, "I am Mira." People listened, really listened. A young alien boy in the crowd whispered to his mother, "Is she me now?" His mother didn't answer, but she looked down, eyes full of thought. Zaire leaned toward Colt and muttered, "You just sparked something." Colt replied without looking away, "About time." Kroll groaned and tried to stand, but Vern put a foot on his back and pushed him down. The crowd gasped again. "I think we've served the wrong people for too long," Vern said quietly. Colt arched a brow, surprised. "You're changing sides?" he asked. Vern looked up. "I'm not blind anymore." Zaira gave a low whistle. "Well, that's a first." Myra couldn't believe it. She looked around at the same streets where she once crawled for crumbs. Now people were parting to let her walk freely, not out of pity, but out of respect. Later that evening, the sun sank low over the rooftops. Colt sat outside the shelter, his shoulder freshly bandaged again. Mira sat beside him, sipping warm broth. Zyra leaned against a post, arms crossed, watching the quiet street. "You did good," Colt said to Myra. She looked at him, unsure. "I just told the truth." "That's the bravest thing anyone can do," he replied. Zyra stretched and stood upright. "The smuggler's ready," she said. "Ship leaves in 1 hour." Myra's heart skipped. 1 hour, she whispered. Colt looked at her. "You still want to go?" Myra didn't answer right away. She looked up at the stars, thinking, "I want to go," she said. "But not to run." "Then why?" Colt asked. "To learn," she replied. "To grow, to help others like me." Colt nodded slowly. Pride flickering in his eyes, Zyra smiled and tapped the edge of her rifle. "I'll make sure she gets there," she promised. Myra stood and walked to Colt. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, cracked stone. "I found this the day you gave me your cloak." She said, "It's nothing special, but I want you to have it." Colt took the stone in his rough hands. It was smooth and worn down, but to him, it was priceless. He closed his hand around it. "I'll keep it safe," he said. They walked together to the launch pad. A small transport ship waited, its lights glowing softly. Zyra gave Colt a nod before boarding. Myra stood in front of him. "Quiet," I thought. "You were just another scary face when I first saw you," she said. Colt chuckled. "A lot of people think that, but you gave me food without asking for anything. You gave me a name." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You gave me something too," he said. "You reminded me why I started fighting." The ship's engines powered on, a low hum rising into the air. Myra turned, climbed the ramp, and stood in the doorway for one last look. Colt raised a hand. She smiled and raised hers back. The door closed slowly, and the ship lifted off into the sky, taking with it not just a girl, but something bigger, hope. And in the middle of a dark, cruel world, one human had changed everything, not with weapons, but with kindness.